Oh no! The Bengals find a way to get it done against Aaron Rodgers in a great game, and yes, that means that Trey Hendrickson, Miles Murphy, Bengals defensive end, opposite Trey Hendrickson, becomes harder to see those guys getting traded. And I know that the 49ers are interested in Trey Hendrickson. That the Bengals had been on that big 4-game losing streak. They went from 2-0 to 2-4. Analytically, still one of the worst teams in football, right there near the Titans in the bottom left. But Thursday night football can yield weird results. Today, even without Trey Hendrickson, who's out with a relatively minor injury, but even without him, the Bengals were able to get the job done, beating the division rival Pittsburgh Steelers in a wild, wild game. We can now see if the standings have been updated with that. Yes, they have. Here they are. Take a look around the entire NFL. So Pittsburgh, they're leading the division at 4-2. Cincinnati's going to think that they still have a shot. I mean, you look at the point differential, it's still minus 78 for Cincinnati. They are not good. Let's establish that right now. The Bengals aren't good. The defense was Swiss cheese, especially without Trey Hendrickson today. But Joe Flacco, trading for him has given them enough of a boost to win this game. I think we can all agree that Cincinnati doesn't win this game with Jake Browning at quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, Freiermuth, the tight end for the Steelers, they just left a little too much time on the clock for Cincinnati. You know, what happened the other way with T. Higgins, he caught the ball against Jalen Ramsey and then he slid down at the very end. Heads up, smart play. You would think that it might have been too early to start thinking about that if you're the Steelers and they needed a touchdown, not just a field goal. So I get it. But if Freiermuth goes down on that preceding drive, then the Steelers might be able to bleed the clock. Again, Cincinnati, not a very good defense. So the strategy goes in Cincinnati's favor in this game. They win it by a final of 33-31. I mean, just an absolutely crazy box score. Aaron Rodgers, 249 yards, 4 touchdowns, a couple picks. It's the receiving box score for Cincinnati over on this side. Jamar Chase, 16 for 161. Higgins, 6 for 96. Nothing bigger than the 29-yarder there at the end when he was able to slide down and essentially seal the victory for Cincinnati because Pittsburgh didn't have enough timeouts to stop it. Now, the most Hail Marys, successful Hail Marys of all time, belongs to Aaron Rodgers. And he just uncorked that one. I mean, that traveled a good 70 yards in the air because he was behind the line of scrimmage. And it had a shot based on distance, but Cincinnati was ready to knock it away. So the Bengals are, you know, it's still at this point, and I've got to show the graphic that I tweeted a little bit earlier today. That's going to take a little while to update with the efficiency from this game, but it's not going to change all too much, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The Bengals are a losing team, right? And this is where their XY efficiency is. It's down here. The defense didn't get any better today. Now, offensively, yes, they've gotten better with Joe Flacco over what Jake Browning was giving them. So they play the Jets next week. They're going to be in the same spot efficiency wise as the Jets. So the Bengals, luckily for them, they had Joe Burrow early and were able to win a couple games early this season. And now they've won their third one. But the Jets are 0-6 with a similar efficiency profile as Cincinnati. And, you know, that leads me to believe that Cincinnati, talking about going all in and doing all this stuff with Joe Burrow, it's a 3-month injury for him. I get it that the league is wide open in a way that it hasn't been in years before, but I think it's safe to say if you're one of the teams in this bottom left right now, a month and a half into this thing, it's going to be really, really hard to actually contend for a Super Bowl. Now, they might feel that their division's a little bit weaker, that they can pass Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh still, I mean, despite it taking absolutely everything for the Bengals to upset the Steelers tonight, the Steelers have been much better. So if I were to project this moving forward, I would say that Pittsburgh, who still has a lead in that division, will win the division. But the Bengals, it's their prerogative. They can do what they want with their players. They don't have to trade them if they don't want to. And today, Trey Hendrickson trade just got further. because the Bengals did win. They play the Jets next. Let's look at the rest of the Cincinnati Bengals schedule before the trade deadline. I'm opening it up right now on the Google machine. Next Sunday, the Jets are visiting Cincinnati. The Bengals should be favored, but I don't think they should be favored by all too much. Again, like, this is not a world-beating Cincinnati team. Then the Bengals, actually, yeah, they're at home over the next two. Then they host the Chicago Bears before the trade deadline on November 2nd. The deadline's on November 4th. So I suppose the Bengals can lose the next two and drop to 3-6, and you would think that would knock them out of contention, make them think about selling. But it's, winning this one was big because it was the division game for the Bengals. Getting this upset over the Steelers, who were favored by about a touchdown, was big. And Thursday night craziness continues. Wild stuff. Our article up on the San Francisco Standard should be up right now. I'm going to get that one out to you guys. Give me just a second. We can talk a little bit about it's, consider this a George Kittle update, and maybe I'll add him to the headline. It's an article about Tatum Bethune, but it's also an article on the tight end situation. Talked to George Kittle in the 49ers locker room today, and apparently he tore his entire hamstring, like full tear, grade 3 tear of his hamstring week 1, which can be an injury that is several months in the required recovery time if it tears off the bone. And Kittle got lucky that it tore in a spot that didn't tear fully off the bone. So he's going to be back for San Francisco on this Sunday game or against the Atlanta Falcons. And I was talking about it a little bit earlier with somebody. This was very close to being major catastrophic crisis number 3 for the 49ers. Because it would have been the first one, obviously, to happen, because Bosa happened in week 3 and then Fred Warner happened in week 6. But the fact that Kittle suffered a full grade 3 hamstring tear, that is complete tear, and it didn't hit the bone. Huge for San Francisco. Like, that's a massive break, because if that one gets to the bone, well, then the 49ers are dealing with their third A-list pillar being out for the season. And again, that would have been the first. It would have been Kittle. Then it would have been Nick Bosa. Then it would have been Fred Warner. Instead, the 49ers get Kittle back. Let's see if Carrie, my editor, was able to get in a picture of George Kittle down at the bottom. He wasn't, but we do have the 49ers team tier chart that I just showed you. We're talking a lot about Nick Martin, obviously Fred Warner leaving on the injury card, and Tatum Bethune, who I think might be the 49ers' best remaining linebacker at this point. It's the 2 lowest graded defenders for San Francisco at Tampa Bay. This is bad news for the 49ers, were D. Winters and Luke Gifford, linebackers number 2 and 3. Bethune stepped in and actually had a better grade than either of those 2 guys. So he's going to have the radio in his helmet because he's a good communicator. 49ers are going to hope that takes this defense to a better spot than it was after Warner was hurt last week. I get that inserting a new linebacker just in the middle of battle there can be a problematic thing. And the 49ers, I think, by and large, communication-wise, were obviously not great. I think that there was that one play, the first touchdown for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where it was very clear that the 49ers didn't pick up the motion. Then Baker Mayfield was able to dice them up the rest of the way. I from an effort perspective, they were happy with the play, and they didn't really blame Tatum Bethune on some of the breakdowns that happened against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You look at the top touchdown, the Tez Johnson, that was on Marquise Siegel. That wasn't on one of the linebackers. You look at that first touchdown that I'm talking about coming off the motion, it looked like that was lost in the shuffle. Might have been D. Winters' responsibility to cover the receiver down the sideline. It's hard to tell if it was on Tatum Bethune, but the 49ers were by and large seemed satisfied with the communication job that Tatum Bethune did with the radio in his helmet. This is a player who doesn't have great measurables. That's why he fell all the way to the 7th round, but he's a sure tackler, plays really fundamentally sound, and the 49ers thought that he was a good communicator at Florida State. So that's why he gets the next nod. And I don't think that it precludes a trade just because Tatum Bethune might be good in the 49ers books, but the way that D Winters has struggled over the past 3 games, Luke Gifford wasn't good against Tampa Bay. You could, I think, fairly easily see Robert Saleh getting one of his linebackers in there, somebody like Quincy Williams, if the 49ers want to raise the floor of that linebacker unit. But the trade at the edge rusher position for somebody like Trey Hendrickson, well, I still think that the Bengals, you guys know my thoughts on this. I think that the Bengals, with how bad they had been this season, and I think will continue to be moving forward. I think, one game Thursday night blip by the skin of their teeth doesn't change the fact where they are here. They were unable to sign Trey Hendrickson to a long-term extension this offseason. And when that's the case, he can walk into unrestricted free agency. That's normally a player that you'd look to sell. The Bengals probably won't do that especially now that they've beaten the Pittsburgh Steelers and are hanging around in the division race. But the 49ers might have to look elsewhere if they're planning to trade for an edge rusher. There's also Myles Murphy, the speedy edge for Cincinnati, who theoretically could have been available had the Bengals really, really slid. But of course, that did not happen. Anyway, let's talk. I think that, these games, whenever we go on Thursday night football, can go any which number of ways. We saw it with the 49ers and the Rams. They can be ripe for upsets. And, when you talk about Thursday night, it's low rest, right? So defenses especially can be banged up and not really on their game. I think they're typically higher scoring games. And we saw it in 49ers Rams, very, very obviously. That was an absolute barn burner where the 49ers defense, despite the fact that it was a heroic finish for them, they also got torched in that game. The Rams defense got absolutely torched by Mac Jones and company. And today, both defenses really, really struggled. I mean, let's go back to the box score. Let's see the total yardage in this game. I love going to the team stats here on the NFL. I mean, both teams are over 6.5 yards per play. 470 yards of offense for the Bengals. 396 yards for the Steelers. But, I mean, Pittsburgh, this is a team that if you go back to the team tier chart here, they had been playing slightly above average defense. This is going to drop into the below average mark. It just continues to corroborate the theory that there aren't a lot of completely dominant teams in the NFL, if any. I mean, the closest that you have to the upper right is LA and Indianapolis, but they're not in the spot where the 2022 or 2023 Niners were. Everybody's straddling one of these lines, right? People are either good offense, mediocre defense, or good defense, mediocre offense, or the 49ers have been mediocre in both directions. But I think they've been Jekyll and Hyde because the injuries have happened and they're sinking defensively. They hope to move this. The 49ers path to success is to move their logo to the right with a return of Brock Purdy. Not going to happen this week in all likelihood, but the Kittle return, the Purdy return, 49ers would hope to be the Bucks or the Lions or the Bills or the Chiefs at some point. Teams with a really good offense, but not a very good defense. And then they could just go and roll the dice there. They have to prevent the offense or the defense from falling off a cliff like the Dallas Cowboys here in the bottom right. But I think that the 49ers formula is fairly simple. All right. I'm taking your questions here. Is Ricky still out? Yeah, no Ricky Pearsall, I would expect this week. He hadn't practiced on Wednesday and Thursday. EB says, years ago, Shanahan was running the ball too much. Now everybody says, run the damn ball. You can't run the ball if you suck at it. If you're not good at running the football, they're at 3.1 yards per carry. That's not going to get it done. You have to be efficient running the ball. That's why Kittle inserted into this for the 49ers. He's the ultimate leverage piece in the NFL. I think that's why George Kittle is such an important re-addition for the 49ers. Regardless of whether it's Brock Purdy or Mac Jones out there, you need your leverage at the line of scrimmage, and I think George Kittle can give that to the 49ers. Pharrell asks if Brock is quarterback 2. Kittle will be starting, yes. I don't know if Purdy's going to be QB2 or emergency QB3. Purdy did seem a little bit more involved in the practice today than he was on Wednesday as I was watching some of those drills, which could mean that he's in that number 2 role for the 49ers. Or emergency 3 is an option. He would dress as emergency 3, but he wouldn't be allowed to enter the game unless Adrian Martinez also got hurt. You'd have to have Mac and Adrian get hurt. So maybe just given the added flexibility that the 49ers would get, maybe Purdy is QB2, but we haven't been in this situation yet. Purdy, I think, is healthier right now than he was entering the game against Jacksonville, in which he started. But that week against Jacksonville, Mac Jones was more hurt than Purdy. So the 49ers had to play Purdy a little bit more hurt, right? So now I think he's in a healthier spot, but they still are smart to wait to get him to 100%. But anyway, because you've got Mac available, the 49ers are in a different setup than they have been. They haven't had this option yet throughout this entire injury saga. The 49ers are now in a position where they can go Mac 1, theoretically Purdy 2, or even more theoretically Purdy emergency 3. We'll say how that looks for the 49ers. But Purdy has been sharp in practice this week. As I told you guys, this was really misreported after the Jacksonville game. Purdy left the Jacksonville game in better shape than he had left the initial Seattle game where he first suffered the injury. So the aggravation actually wasn't as serious as the first injury. And the 49ers thought, okay, maybe he just misses the Rams game and then we have to run him back out there for Tampa. But I think that the calculus at that point was that the 49ers would probably lose to the Rams. If you had to give him truth serum, like yes, you believe as the 49ers, you absolutely have to enter a game believing that you can win. But realistically speaking, even though they beat the Rams on that Thursday night, realistically speaking, that wasn't a high probability victory, right? So when that happened and the 49ers, they moved to what, 4-1? They had a 2% chance, even based on the post-game stats, of winning that game. And it landed on the 2%. That bought San Francisco some longer runway with Brock Purdy. You didn't have to force him out there against Tampa Bay the next week. They didn't. You don't have to force him out there against Atlanta because you won the big one. You won the division one against the Rams. You're 3-0 now, and you've beaten every single team in the division. They can actually let this Atlanta game play out. They're still favored, even though Mac Jones is likely to start. And then I think the most likely return for Brock Purdy is the game against the Houston Texans. What's my assessment of Connor Colby so far? I think that he's a rookie who's struggled so far, point blank. I mean, the pass protection hasn't been great. It's been some missed run assignments. I think that he hasn't done terribly. I think that, there's the initial experience that he can hang his hat on, but the 49ers weren't planning on him being in there so early. Unfortunately, Ben Barch got hurt. You're asking me if Drew Moss will step up in place if Pooney can't go Sunday. Pooney was back out of practice today, so I don't think that's going to be a contingency the 49ers have to go to. And I'm not sure if Drew Moss, he's more of a developmental guy. They carried him on the 53 so he wouldn't get poached. But there's a good chance they could call up Nick Zakel or even use Matt Hennessy at that right guard position if they need an emergency substitute at that spot. Will the Hulk play? No, the Hulk is still on the practice squad. I don't see them using a call up for him because they didn't suffer any further defensive line injuries against the Bucs. Mark says, I have a feeling the Niners will acquire players from the Jets if and when they make a move. Yes, so Cincinnati, we're talking about them as a team that's not very good, but they found a way to win tonight, which should give them some more false hope. The Jets, even though they're better than Cincinnati on this chart, they're 0-6. That they shouldn't have any delusions of grandeur left at this point. And the Jets also have the 49ers connection with Robert Saleh. There's Jermaine Johnson, the edge rusher. There is Quincy Williams, the linebacker. Probably some other players that the 49ers might be interested in due to the Robert Saleh ties. But both Johnson and Quincy Williams are under contract through 2026. And I think the 49ers are trying to avoid rentals. They're trying to get guys who actually make them better this year and in 2026 because you want the two timelines thought is not very popular since it didn't really work for the Warriors, but that's exactly how the 49ers are trying to think. They're trying to think near term and into 2026. And I think that if you have players that match up well with what Robert Saleh is doing, and he knows Johnson and he knows Quincy Williams well, the 0-6 Jets might be interested in offloading them with a new regime there under Aaron Glenn. Steve already wondering if Aaron Glenn gets fired next week. 0-7 start. Remember that Kyle Shanahan started, 0-8 or 0-9 for the 49ers, but they were competitive early on, and there was no chance they were going to fire Kyle Shanahan. They gave him a 6-year deal along with John Lynch at the very start. It's very important for John and Kyle to get deals that long to ensure that they had time to turn the thing around for the 49ers when they inherited such a bad roster in 2017. The Jets do have players who are going to help. They could be plug-and-play guys, too, since Robert Saleh was their coach in New York and is now the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. Ryan asks us a good question. Why is Evan Anderson so low on the depth chart? Because Kalia Davis was hurt last year, so that's why Evan Anderson was definitely better than Kalia. That has been one of the more surprising turns, though. Because Kalia hadn't been particularly productive for the 49ers, and then he broke his hand. So he's been playing in a club, and I don't even have him in an injury shading anymore since he's been active and everything. But Anderson got demoted to the practice squad. I thought he did some good stuff for the 49ers last year. He's obviously a different type of player than Kalia. Kalia's lighter, I think a little bit more explosive. Anderson is a little bit more stout. They might like the way that Kalia has been playing the run in the wide nine. They're obviously giving the two rookies as many snaps as they can between Alfred Collins and CJ West, and that's what pushed Evan Anderson out of the picture. Elliott is the one veteran there who's getting playing time because he is more of a veteran stalwart. But when you look at Kalia versus Evan Anderson, even with the broken hand, I thought Evan might get the call up after Kalia broke his hand. They initially thought Kalia was going to be out for 2 weeks, but he was able to play right away. So I still think that we do see Evan at some point this season. I still think that we probably see Sebastian Valdez at some point this season. It's impossible to go through a year, it seems, for the 49ers without an injury at a particular group. And it's just a defensive tackle. Even though CJ West and Kalia Davis have both suffered fractures on their hands, they've both been able to basically stay in the lineup. West only missed one game for the 49ers, but that was back when they still had Yetur Gross-Matos available, doing some of that action on the inside. Now Yetur Gross-Matos is hurt, so they're closer and closer to tapping into the practice squad. Mark asks if the 49ers were able to sign a trade for Simmons with the Titans and extend him. Would that be worth a first-round 2026 pick? I personally think so. I think Simmons is an absolute game wrecker. I think he's the best. He's like the closest to Aaron Donald right now. And it's not Aaron Donald. I get it, right? Like, let's put that there. But he's at the top of the pass rush win rate rankings of all defensive tackles, and he could also stop the run. He's an absolute physical freak. He's got size. He's got the ability to be a fire hydrant inside. If you can get your hands on Jeffrey Simmons, I get that your salary cap situation is something you're trying to preserve as much moving into the future, but that's a deal that you really think about swinging, because even if you use the first round pick, if it's for a 1, as Mark asks, that player is not guaranteed to become a Jeffrey Simmons. Simmons is a proven commodity, prime of his career. I think if you're talking about a 3-year timeline for the 49ers right now, where they want it, this is the 3-year window that they have to get one in. If you're going to win one for Kittle, for Fred Warner, for Christian McCaffrey, like, it's now. It's these 3 years. This might be the ramp up in the 3-year cycle. Simmons is going to be good. I think it's a fair bet for the next 3 years. So if you're pushing the chips in, not necessarily for 2025, but 26 and 27, Jeffrey Simmons, the 49ers have been light at that defensive tackle position. Like, they tried to Band-Aid it with Javon Hargrave in 2023, but he didn't play the run well enough. Simmons plays the run and he plays the pass. He is a bona fide star. Simmons, just think ahead to 2026. Simmons, Bosa, they've got Huff under contract for 2026. That's big too. I think that they started this season with such a good pass rush with 4 to close games, right? You had Bosa, you had Huff on the edges. You had in the middle, the 49ers would bring the heat with Michael Williams pushing the pocket. I thought he did a really good job taking length, the power for the 49ers to push the pocket, and Yetur Gross-Matos. So now two of those guys are hurt. The vision for how the 49ers can wreck games is insanely compromised. And you look forward into future years and you're like, okay, who are going to be the stalwarts that disrupt and allow the 49ers to become a top ranked defense again? If you have the budget and you have the desire to get this back up into top 10, top 5 territory defensively, yeah, sure. Getting Nick Bosa and Fred Warner back would be nice. But even with those guys this year, with that developing defense, is probably a top 10 to 12 unit. If you want to be top 5 again, yeah, Jeffrey Simmons, if he's available. I've heard that the Titans might just decide to keep him because they, even though they're 0-6, they think he could be a good enough foundational pillar for them. And all power to the Titans. I think that's smart football. I don't know if selling Jeffrey Simmons would be a good idea. He's that good. Be like the Rams trying to sell Aaron Donald, even though they went through some lean years. They were happy at the end of the day that they kept him. And I think Jeffrey Simmons probably falls into the same category. Steven says, let's can the season. Why? The 49ers are 4-2. They're leading the division. If the playoffs started today, the 49ers would be NFC West champions. There is no dominant team in the NFL. If the 49ers could just tug their offense over here to the right, beyond that, where Washington, Seattle, New England, Tampa Bay is, the 49ers can, they can make this as entertaining as anybody in the league. You can't say can the season based on the parity around this league, based on the fact that Brock Purdy and this offense, George Kittle, those guys have a track record. Pearsall probably back next week. I would say Ayuk. They're talking about week 10 for Brandon Ayuk. I mean, it's one of those things for the 49ers where they need to keep on fighting because you owe it to the locker room. You owe it to the status of the league right now. There is so much parity around the league. You're also building culture for 2026 and beyond. Just get these rookies one playoff game, and you're going to be so much better off for the 2026 potential run than you would have been without that one playoff game. As 916 49ers says, stay the course. Only losers are giving up at this point. I mean, you have to be a big, big loser to wave the white flag when you are 4-2 in first place in your division in a league full of parity. That is a depressing losing mentality. I see a lot of fans coming out with that, and I'm like, what exactly is wrong with your own life right now to think that you should just wave the white flag when you're first place in the NFC West at 4-2? I mean, that's backwards logic, probably only logic that had been introduced to the world around this time of human history. If somebody said that to you in 1994 and the 90s or the 80s or the 80s or the 70s, they'd be like, what is wrong with you? You're 4-2. Toughen up and continue playing. You've got to fight. Because if that fight leaves the building just because on paper you've lost some important players, it's going to be really hard to get that fight back in 2026. That's a cultural thing. That's a locker room thing. You fight to the end here because even if you don't make it to the Super Bowl, even if you don't make it to the playoffs, the fight that you show now has a really good chance of showing up in 2026. That kind of stuff carries over. It carried over for the 49ers back in 2018. Like, they kept on fighting in 2017 and 2018, turned into the 2019 Super Bowl run. So these seasons are connected in many ways, especially with how these buildings work. Here's a good question. Did Cincinnati give up today? No, they didn't. And you know what? I thought Cincinnati was going to lose this game. Probably if it's a Sunday, they do. They got some Thursday night weirdness. Cincinnati's not going to give up. They're going to continue fighting. Now, you hit a point where mathematically, like, you just can't get out of it. And I thought if Cincinnati lost today, they would have to start thinking about that. But they beat their division rivals. They stick in it. Now, I think they're weak enough to still lose to the Jets potentially next Sunday. And maybe before the November 4th deadline, they think about selling. But I think that the most likely sellers are the New York Jets. I want to open this up. There we go. There we are. Bottom left, New York Jets, 0-6. They're not likely to be keeping players around, I think, with the way that things are going right now. Marcellus gets it. The idea of quitting is so weird. It's so weird when the team is 4-2. At this point, I have to stop in and start calling people out. If you're thinking about kicking away the season at 4-2, it's unfathomable to me. This is a man sport. This is a sport that requires investment. And punting a season with a winning record after what the 49ers have done from a grittiness standpoint just to get to this point, it's just not going to happen. Sorry, guys. They're going to keep on fighting. They're favored over the Falcons on Sunday. So follow this through to its conclusion. If the 49ers, they were underdogs against the Bucs. This time they're favored. They lost against Tampa Bay. If they win, as they are favored to do, they will be 5-2. The 2023 49ers were 5-2. They were 5-3 before they turned it around to beat Jacksonville to move to 6-3 coming out of the bye week. They probably will be favored against the Texans. The 49ers will be if they win this week. It'll be close, but if Purdy's coming back, I would put my money on the 49ers. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I would put it on the 49ers. So that's 5-2. That's 6-2. That they could be 7-2 after the next 3 games. They could also lose the next 3, in which case, yeah, your calculus might change ahead of the trade deadline if you're the 49ers. So it's one of those things where it is absolutely idiotic to say that the 49ers are going to pack it in. It runs counter to any logical way of thinking in the NFL. You compete until competing can't yield you your desired result. And when you're in first place, then competing has definitely yielded the 49ers the result that they want at this point. You can't. There is no clear-cut Super Bowl team at this point. The only clear-cut Super Bowl team, if it existed, would be right here. Would be very good offensively, very good defensively. That team does not exist this year. It is a wide open league, and the 49ers need to continue playing this accordingly. Greedy Greg 415, would a trade like Juwan Jennings in the late third for Simmons from Tennessee be ideal? I don't think Tennessee would necessarily be interested in picking up Juwan Jennings. They would have to extend him as well. Jennings needs to go to a receiver. If they're going to trade Jennings, it has to go to a receiver needy contender. And Tennessee is definitely not a contender, as you can see here. Player for player trades are really hard for that reason. You've got to find guys that fit into the right slot for that reason, as far as contending teams, non-contending teams, all that. All right, Trey Hendrickson gets a bit further. So does Miles Murphy. The Jets are still terrible, and so are the Bengals. So who knows? Trade deadline's not till November 4th. Did a little emergency reaction show for you. Like and subscribe, and hey, go to the San Francisco Standard. Check out this article. I'm going to pin it right at the top right now. Talk about Tatum Bethune. Best way to support all this content is to head to the Standard and do some good reading, because when you do read, you'll get to know the 49ers on an even deeper level. Sub to the channel. Go check out the Standard. We'll talk to you guys very soon.